Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to a makeup and movie Monday. I hope you're doing well. So today I'm here to do a full face of makeup talking about movies. So normally I like to kind of concentrate on either a film or a genre or, recently a director, but today I want to do something a bit different and I want to talk about movies that I saw way too young. And I know we're all guilty of it, especially people my age, around the early 30s, late 30s. We grew up watching movies that maybe our parents didn't want us to watch, but we watched them anyway. I mean, in my case, it was encouraged to kind of watch these movies. And I kind of want to talk about just the type of films and how they kind of impacted my life and changed my life, because a lot of them have, not for the worse but kind of for the better, and just having a general chat. So yeah, let's get on with it. I mean, if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm Ameena. I like to talk about makeup, but then I also like to talk about movies. I'm a big movie fan, I'm a big geek, and I just love talking really, in case you haven't seen. But if you're new here, please subscribe, because every Monday I do a video like this, and then throughout the week I just do makeup things. So yeah, everything I'm going to be wearing I always mention in the description, so if you're ever curious, have a look. So let's get on with putting makeup on my face. So I mean, the first thing that we're going to talk about is a movie, the first movie I went to see in the cinema that I was way too young to see, because cinema has changed over the years. Because when I was very young, I was very tall for my age. Like when I was in primary school and even secondary school as well, I basically was a giant. A lot of people thought I used to be older than I really was, because I have a family of very tall people. So even growing up, most of my life I was over 5 foot, and even now I'm on like 5'6" or whatever. But growing up I used to end up I went to the cinema a lot with my family. We're a big cinema kind of family, and very like film orientated and music orientated, so we'd go to the cinema a lot. And during this time, I think I must have been either 12 or 13. I went to see the South Park movie in the cinema with my sister. So it's quite a funny story. We had gone out for the day with my aunt, and they had gone to see, I think they actually went to go and see Phantom Menace, because that was how long ago it was, Star Wars, in case you're like, what is that? And yeah, me and my sister went to see the South Park movie, and of course I was way too young to watch it, because I believe at the time it was either a 15 certificate or an 18 certificate. And I remember when going to these movies, everyone was like, what's your date of birth? When were you born? And I'm kind of like on the spot, but I never got asked how old I was. I actually felt quite lucky and quite kind of cheeky, because I was like, all these kind of like maybe actual people who are actually that age are being asked for ID, and then someone like me who is actually nowhere near that age can like happily go into the screen. But I remember I would like kind of prepare myself for the the questions, and they'd be like, what age are you, what year were you born? I'm like, I was born in and I'm kind of like panicking as you're going into the screen and when you're buying tickets. But it was always fine. Like I never had any issues going into the screen, so I felt quite lucky on that sense. But I remember, because obviously I was a big South Park fan growing up, and when I saw the film was coming out, I was like, I have to go to see it. And this is obviously way before things on the internet and things before, you can stream and you can, get this and that version. But obviously back then piracy was a big thing, and just going to the cinema was probably the better way to go and see a film. Excuse this, I'm going to there's a process I'm making with this face. But yeah, I remember going to see it and just being absolutely just shocked when I went to see it, because obviously I was used to the TV show, but the film really brought, like, if you've seen the film and you would know what I'm talking about, it is like the TV show but times 50. Like, it's absolutely insane. And I remember watching it and just absolutely laughing my ass off because it was just so good. And it's been a while. Oh my god, this foundation's actually really light for me. I have a bronzer, it's fine, I'm gonna sort everything out. But yeah, I remember kind of just watching it and absolutely just loving it and thinking it was freaking awesome. But yeah, that was kind of, it was quite funny because that's my first experience of going into the cinema, of watching a film that I shouldn't have, and that's always stuck with me because of course now there's so many changes in the aspect of, you know, how old are you, let's see some ID and blah blah blah, and of course they had that then, but it wasn't as bad as it kind of is now. It's not as kind of lenient, or I was just lucky. But yeah, going into the cinema and watching that, I don't know if that was probably one of the only films that I did see kind of growing up that I wasn't, I mean, I'm pretty sure there were like a ton of other movies that I was probably not supposed to see in the cinema, but I saw anyway. I think I remember, actually this is probably a really weird movie, but I think the first 18 film I might have seen was the Scary Movie. The first Scary Movie, I remember, I think it was either the first one or the second one. Me and my sister went to see it as well. It was weird, me and my sister went to see a lot of movies together. But yeah, I remember us going to see it. I think it was the second one, because obviously it was the one with the haunted house. I fucking love that movie. But yeah, that one I do remember us seeing. So I think that might have been another movie that I saw that I probably wasn't supposed to at that age. But yeah, I just remember growing up and watching so many movies that I really wasn't supposed to. And this is a list of them. I mean, I'm just going to kind of talk through them because I was having a good think, and I've written everything down, so I've got my notes here. But of course, the main culprit on me watching, like, you know, the movies that I watched way too young was all Arnie movies. And I know a lot of people will be agreeing with me on this as well. I was born in 87, so a lot of his kind of good movies were already out. And this is all movies that were either on TV or we had them on tape, because like I said, I come from a family that are really film and TV orientated, so we'd always watch a movie that was on ITV or like BBC or something like that. Like on a Saturday at like 10 o'clock, you know, there'd be like an 18 movie, and I'd always stay up, of course, because I'm a rebel and I would just sit and watch these movies with my dad. But of course, all Arnie movies are the main kind of culprit. So for me, I think I saw, it must have been Terminator 1 first. Of course, Terminator 2 is more kid friendly. I mean, not kid friendly, but as in like, not as, it's not an 18 certificate, basically. It's a movie that is for a younger audience, because when you look at both those movies, number one, really scared the crap out of me. Like, even the scene today where Kyle and Sarah are like, you know, they're escaping the Terminator, and they get to like the factory and it explodes and he comes out as the skeleton, the ectoskeleton. That shit still scares me, even as like a 30-year-old. The anxiety of knowing that this kind of, it's not, I mean, he's a monster, it's a monster, but this kind of robot skeleton. I know now it sounds really stupid, but if you watch just how amazing that movie is, but watching it as a kid, I was shitting my pants. And especially, like I said, that one isn't 18, so I grew up watching T2, but then as I kind of got a bit older, I did watch the first one, and even the scene when they're in the police station, I'm just like, this movie is it's proper intense. And I know a lot of people will feel, a lot of my friends and a lot of people who, you know, grew up watching 80s movies feel exactly the same way when it comes to just Arnie in general. And like I said, Terminator, and then you've got to look at Predator as well, because I remember watching that and kind of be like, what the hell is this creature? Like, you just see, it's a very kind of like macho movie, of course. It's one of just those movies, it's like, I'm a man and I'm gonna fight for my country and I'm gonna kill this fucking alien and all that shit. But I remember watching it when I was really young, and I was just like, this movie is completely insane. And I always found it just quite funny. But even now, it's really, some of the scenes are super intense. Obviously, like the showdown at the end is probably just one of the greatest kind of like action sequences you can think of when it comes to movies. Just like the tension and the surroundings, and this man just doesn't know what the fuck is happening, like what is this creature, and yeah, just what's happening around him. And then of course Running Man was a big one for me as well. I think that movie I I watched when I was young, and I was just like, this is just a weird action movie, and just a really kind of, I really love it. It was definitely a film I loved as a kid, even though it is obviously extremely violent. I know in the kind of not TV version, in the beginning when that guy, I mean, if you haven't seen this, it's a bit of a spoilers, but again, these movies are freaking old, so if you haven't seen them, please do watch them. In the kind of opening scene when they're in that kind of factory, and the guy thinks that their neck brace is free, he starts running, and his head explodes. And of course that is not in the TV version, but as an adult, when I saw the kind of unedited version, I saw it and I was like, imagine watching that as a kid. You just like, you kind of know what's going to happen, but when it happens, it's just like, oh, because it's a very graphic scene. Like you literally see a guy head just explode off, and of course most kids these days just won't, it would not fathom them at all. But yeah, Arnie for me is like the #1 action hero that I grew up watching. And of course, for someone like me, I'm a big horror fan, so watching movies like The Exorcist and watching, oh sorry, I'm just dropping everything, watching The Exorcist, and then watching God, like even watching the It movie, like the TV movie, was pretty intense. And I still actually do prefer it to like the new version. It's very strange. I know it's different because it's very modern, like the new version. But watching that one as a kid and seeing Tim Curry as It, oh my god. I mean, if that did not scare you, I don't know who you are, because it's fucking scary. Even now, it's just like, of course he's not in it as much as you would kind of like to hope, but you knew when he was coming, and it would still freak the hell out of me because it was just, oh my god, it's just intense. But yeah, watching again, I know a lot of people are like, oh, The Exorcist is not scary. When I was young, I did find it pretty intense. I mean, even now as an adult, I don't find it as scary, but I find it very atmospheric, and it's a very beautiful movie. It is one of my kind of like favorite horror movies ever, because I grew up watching it. It's so intense, and just everything about it, you know, even when I was a kid, when I watched it, I never really understood what the hell was going on, because, you know, I grew up in like a Muslim household, so obviously having something like an exorcist was never mentioned, even though they do happen in all cultures. But then this movie of this kind of rich American family being affected by something, as a kid you just don't think about it. And of course watching like Nightmare on Elm Street, at the age of like 12, 13, of course those movies are going to be just impactful, and they still are to me, because they're just movies that I feel can never be replaced. A lot of movies obviously are being remade, and you know they're just, it's not the same. Like the feel from the 80s is always going to be so much better. There were different times and different things happening in the world, and you know, you just can't beat it really. And then a bit more kind of random movies that I'm going to kind of think about. One that I didn't think about as much was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I mean, I put up a picture here of me when I was a kid on my 3rd birthday, of me holding a tape, and it was my favourite film growing up, and it was just a movie that I would watch to death. And then now when you watch it as an adult, you're like, this is intense. Like the scene where Doom is like, I killed your brother, and his eyes are just red and fucking crazy, and you're like, oh, that's pretty intense. But I mean, watching that as a kid, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's like, oh no, as an adult, you're like, oh, it's super messed up, and it's super like, intense. But for me, because it's a kids film, I never thought it would kind of impact you in a certain way, if that makes any sense, because I watched it just being absolutely in love with that movie, and then as an adult you're like, oh no, he's kind of like killed his brother and dropped a piano in his head, and it's just like, what? It's just really crazy shit. And even talking about Disney movies as well, like Bambi, I always felt like Bambi was, obviously I know that's one that everyone talks about, and it's a very intense movie for children to watch, because like a little baby's mother gets murdered. And even I think I watched it quite about a year ago, and I remember the scene obviously when she dies, and just how sad it is. Like a fucking a deer's mother gets shot in front of him, and then he's just completely lost. And of course it's kind of like a happy ending where, you know, he makes lots of friends and he kind of is just living his life. But it's really intense, man. Like it's a movie where you just kind of like, oh, it kind of, some of it just leaves really like sad, and not bitter, but just, yeah, just really sad. And then also this one, it still kind of stays with me a lot, but Witches. And I like the original one with Angelica Houston, not the Anne Hathaway one, because I've not seen that and I really have no intention of seeing it. But I remember watching that as a kid and just like, what? It's just like these bunch of these really nice like older women who have gone somewhere for a conference, but of course it ends up being much more than anyone expects it to be. Like, I remember reading the book as a kid and it being really intense, and I love Roald Dahl books. I grew up like a lot of people reading his books and then watching the adaptations as well, but them always being much more dark. I don't know what, like, you know, the directors did to all these Roald Dahl books, but they're all, I mean, they're pretty dark in themselves. But watching the Witches movie, I remember growing up, and I absolutely love Angelica Houston. I think she's an amazing actress, especially in Addams Family. And then seeing something like The Witches, she's just I mean, obviously, like in real life, she's a very kind of interesting person. Like, she just has these really sharp features, and is very kind of perfect to play this type of character. And of course, when you're watching the film, you're like, oh, she's just like a normal lady with her friends. And then the scene when they take off their skin, you're like, what the actual frick? Like, I don't even know what certificate that movie is, but it's intense for a kid's film. And the fact that when they all turn into mice and they all just, yeah, I mean, if you've seen it, you would know what I mean. It's a crazy movie, but I really recommend it. Like, if you haven't seen it, it's such a great film. And I know a lot of people have, there's kind of like a lot of controversy around the newer version. I mean, I'm not gonna see it because I don't really care for it, to be honest, but I still really recommend the original one, of course. And then a lot of violent movies I watched as a kid is like, you know, of course I'm going to talk about like Goodfellas and watching The Godfather, although The Godfather for me, even watching it now, I don't feel it's as violent. And I'm using that term loosely, because that scene where Sonny gets shot, that is fucking horrible. That scene when he gets shot at the highway, I'm like, wow. Because even now when I'm watching it, I don't remember like the anticipation towards it, but I remember when I still watch it as an adult, because I think I watched the movie, I think the last time I watched it was a couple of months ago, and even that scene, I'm kind of like, that's so insane. But when you think of other gangster movies, you obviously lots of gun shooting and, you know, just, you know, lots of violence. And The Godfather does have that, but it doesn't have it on a scale like Goodfellas, even though Goodfellas is obviously heavily inspired by that type of film. But obviously Scorsese turn it up a couple of notches. But yeah, I remember watching a lot of my favourite films as a kid, even what, like, you know, Usual Suspects is my favourite film of all time, and that movie has mild amount of violence in it, but again, I watched that way too young. And even I mean, I grew up again, like I mentioned, in the 90s, and having a movie like Fight Club come out when I was way too young. But of course I watched it. I didn't watch it in the cinema because I think I kind of missed that opportunity of going to see it in the cinema. But when I watched it on DVD, it changed my life. I know that sounds so cliche, but watching that movie as like a kind of a teenager who's obsessed with movies, and watching a movie that is so kind of impactful, and obviously the meaning towards it, I never really understood it as kind of a teenager, but as an adult now, you understand the whole thing about commercialism and just life is just fucked up in general. But I absolutely I have a soft spot for violent movies. I don't know why. I know that sounds so kind of psycho serial killer type of thing, but everyone's like that now. Like, a lot of people would be like, oh, I love watching true crime documentaries and I love watching these other type of movies. I'm always happy to admit that I watch these type of films. I'm just going to set my face quickly and then I'm going to put my lips on in a moment. But let's talk about, I mean, some films that my dad didn't let me watch. So this is where I kind of understood some of the, oh my God, I've got mascara on my face. I'll sort that in a second. So in case you guys didn't know much about Clockwork Orange, it was kind of, Kubrick kind of took it off, you know, the radar for a very long time. And before he passed, they did re-release it. And during that time, there were lots of like pirate copies and lots of versions out there that, you know, you weren't supposed to have, because it's a movie that was essentially, he banned himself, and he didn't want a lot of people to see because there was a lot of controversy behind it. But I remember my dad talking about it a lot when I was a kid, and of course it was this special, because, you know, Kubrick's his favourite director and also mine too. And then talking about this movie just really intrigued me. And of course it was that and Natural Born Killers, and of course that was it was a very controversial movie as well, quite, you know, banned in, if you want to call it that aspect. But then watching the movies, I think I watched them when I must have been over the age of 18. I remember watching Clockwork Orange for the first time and I was just like, this movie is just fucking gorgeous. It's amazing. And I mean, it stuck with me for so long. That's why it's just one of my favourite films of all time, basically. And I kind of understood why, as an adult, my dad never kind of let me watch it, because he really did not let me watch it until I was about, again, 18 years old. And it's the same with Natural Born Killers as well. I'm just gonna quickly do my lips and I'll be right back. All right, this has to be one of the worst makeup looks I think I've ever done. Like, I look really weird, I look a bit horrible, but anyway, I guess that shows me from watching movies at such a young age. But I just want to give a quick shout out to Monty Python movies as well. I obviously got influence for them from my dad, because he is a big fan as well. And watching those movies, they're really not safe for work type of movies, or even like this show is just insane to watch. And again, growing up in a family where we were just like, it's just TV, it's not real. I mean, I think I've grown up pretty okay in the aspect of I'm not violent, I'm not, you know, I haven't been to jail. I know that's like just a really super stereotypical, like, oh, if you play computer games, you know, violent games, you'll be like this, or if you watch violent movies, you're like this. I think sometimes that's just bollocks, but of course they can be very influential as well, like certain music and, you know, movies and things. But I mean, let me know what you think. I know that's a weird tangent on you know, like watching things way too young, but I feel like they've made me who I am today. Like, obviously I'm very geeky, I'm very like nerdy in the movie aspect, and I love that. I think it's just given me a personality to talk about movies and talk about music that I love and not be embarrassed about it. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know a movie that you watched when you were way too young, because we've all been there, no matter what age you are. You know, even if you were born in the 2000s, now you're what, going to be 21 or something. Like, what movie did you watch when you were way too young? And let me know. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because I film and upload every time I get a chance to. Don't forget to follow me on my social media, because I might put up a picture of this face. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I hope you're doing well, you're healthy, happy and safe. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.